Welcome, everyone, to our episode review of... No, can start that again.
You know you're going to put it in the streaming. So let's just keep rolling.
It's the humorous outtake is what everyone loves to start it with. Welcome to our review of the fourth episode of Strange New World, Memento Mori, where we talk about another La'an episode, which was unexpected. You should never wonder if you're giving too many La'an episodes to our viewers this early, but apparently they are. And this was very much in the line of a...
in the La'an of...
in the La'an of
I
things.
mean, we had some Uhura, we had some Hammer, even some Una and Mbenga got their own, so I think everyone was in the pool on this one.
Definitely. I think we still need like a chapel episode. We still need a proper Mbenga episode. I think the next one's going to be Spock, but maybe we could get a Pike episode. I think part for the first few episodes and him just being generally awesome. We haven't had a dedicated. We need some Pike moments.
That sort of thing where it's like this is the second Lan episode, but I don't know. It kind of depends on whether or not you classify the first episode as Lan or Pike or both, or where the balance kind of goes.
True, but it opens.
I kind of like that about that, though, that they're giving a little bit of something to most of the crew each week. So.
This doesn't feel like what they're doing with sort of like Discovery or Picard, where it's like, here's the title characters, and then there's the other crew. They are making this is an ensemble cast right from the get-go. This is everyone's having their moment. Everyone is a main character, which I appreciate. Oh, Ortegas. We need the Ortegas episode as well. Like that. I think a lot of people are clamoring for that at this point.
I want the Kyle Riley episode.
Yes. Is his surname Riley? Is that Kyle Riley?
No, it's...
We were talking about this when we were watching it just now.
Chief Kyle and then Una Shinra. I keep confused. I think they're married. I don't know what's going on.
Are you shipping now?
Are
you getting into the shipping wars?
I gotta take my medication. Grandpa will be back in a minute.
So yeah, this last episode. How do we feel about the previously on? Because it's like, I'm assuming they're now going to do this every episode, and I don't know if it's needed.
It feels completely unnecessary.
Yeah.
So in a lot of shows, what they'll do is the traditionals and to not do that. But if you have a thread you want to pick up from, say, 3 or 4 episodes ago, then they'll do that with the relevant clips. And so in episode 3, we had a couple sort of pseudo cliffhangers at the end. One with Una, one with Mbenga. So if they want to pick that thread up in a couple weeks, then maybe do the previously on and include those clips. But doing one every week, if you're out there in front saying, hey, we're episodic, then maybe that's not necessary.
It's a funny inclusion.
Well, yeah, it's especially interesting because we had a friend of ours who had not seen Strange New Worlds watch this episode on its own without having seen 1, 2, and 3. And even with that previously on, it felt like he needed context. Like he was like, I feel like I should be watching this from the beginning. So if you're striking for that episodic feel, then for the people who are here for the, who are going to be in for the long haul, they feel like it's unnecessary. But the people who are jumping straight in feel like they haven't got enough context. So it's like, either make these previously ons feel more substantial or don't bother with them. I feel like there's a weird halfway house where it's like, you get a few lines, but it's not really a direct through line into what the episode is actually about.
Can we just say this is probably one of the best episodes for showing the beauty shots of the Enterprise and ship battle and the ships outside, because they open up and they've got, they pan down onto the ship as it falls around, and then when we see it later in the episode of flying through, this is giving us more appreciation, more motion picturesque ship porn shots than a lot of the series previous.
Nebulas make everything better because
you
get like all the running lights and Tron torpedoes you can handle, and then B, you get some of the gaseous like lines and movement from the ship. So yeah, nebulas are great for that.
Well, yeah, it's as close as you can get in space to having a proper ships cresting their waves type thing. I know you're not much of a ship guy, but like I really did appreciate. This is one of the best looking shows, and definitely one of the best. It looks better than some of the movies, to be honest, in terms of sheer visual effects.
It does look very good, yeah.
I said this to you guys before, but I am an absolute sucker for starships coming out of clouds. Like when that Gorn capital ship puffs out of the clouds, it's very little bit of insurrection in there. There's some other shots, but it comes out and you're just like, oh yeah, that's pretty badass, and it's a nice design of the ship. But before we go on to the battle itself, a little sort of pre-roll. They spent a bit of a moment commemorating ships they were on. Obviously, we've seen Pike is wearing the Discovery badge, and La'an doesn't want to wear the SS. What was it? I forget the name.
Puget Sound.
The Tsiolkovsky.
Yes. Oh my god.
funny
I
thing-
would have killed if someone had the Tsiolkovsky on there. That would have been great.
Good old Transporter Chief Kyle, now apparently married to Una, is wearing a USS Shenzhou pin.
Is he
from
really?
Discovery.
Oh, do you
Yeah.
reckon he must have served? He must have been in the
That,
binary
'cause I
stars.
think you can wear it if you served on that ship, or if you knew someone who served on that ship and died in the line of duty.
Very interesting. But yeah, there was a period of commemoration. I think mainly as sort of plot background for Lan, sort of giving her why isn't she wearing the badge? Sort of everyone's commemorating.
Yeah, so we'll talk about this at the end when we grade it, and I give it a 1 out of 10 this week. But I guess I've been conditioned by the older Trek. You know, they open with Captain's log, they set up the scene, and then they go into like the A plot. And I felt this one was a little muddled at the beginning because we did get the commemoration stuff. We got some Uhura and Hammer stuff for a minute in the hallway, and then we went into the plot and jumped right into things, and we're down on the planet 30 seconds later, and it took me, my old brain, a minute to get my head around what was happening. So I thought, and maybe they went a little bit too long in the middle. So if they'd have given more to the stuff at the beginning, let that breathe, and then set up the A plot, I think that would have worked a little better. Because they do kind of capstone things beginning and end with the memorial stuff, and it's a nice little thread to have, but maybe they could have given that just a hair longer.
Yeah, I feel like, because there's a lot of influences from other Star Trek episodes and movies in this, most notably all the submarine ones, which was like, Wrath of Khan, Starship Down, all these.
Which, by the way, I swear I heard a couple hooks from Wrath of Khan in that, especially when they were doing the good old, nebula stuff, fly next to each other and you don't see it. So
I wouldn't be surprised. But what it also heavily reminded me of was Disaster, where you have to deal with
Yes.
4 or 5 different plots, and some of them were fairly inconsequential. This one, I think, kept it to more like ABC plot. Like you've got your main overarching Gorn threat, which is basically Lan stuff. You've got stuff down at sickbay. You've got Uhura and Hammer, and those are your sort of 3 main threads. Disaster, I think, kind of.
Well, you forgot about Data's head too. That
yeah.
made an appearance in the episode.
Yeah. But I feel like Disaster did do a little bit better of a job of kind of putting everything on the board and making sure that you could see where all these threads are roughly going to go in a more measured way and roughly the same kind of time scale. Whereas this, I feel like it did an okay job, but it does go a bit okay, and then you're kind of thrust into it. It really wants to get going. The show.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah. Yes, it really does. I mean, this is illustrated by the point when they beam down landing party, armor and all, everything, and you think, okay, this is where the action is going to happen. Nope, zoom, they're beamed up, and that is possibly one of the first. That was almost jarring as a long-time Star Trek fan for them to just be beamed back aboard the ship without any drama whatsoever. Like, we need to be beamed up now. Okay, then, done. It's done.
No, you see, what should have happened is they should have left them on there for another 5 minutes while the Enterprise fucked around in space. 5 red shirts should have died to establish stakes, and then they should have beamed up.
It was actually consecutive sentences because Pike says, "There's another ship here. We're going to beam you up," and the very next line is Spock saying they've been beamed aboard. I'm like, damn, there goes Chief Kyle again, really on the ball. So,
man, he's really good at his job.
But I mean, yeah, alien ship plus giant swaths of blood all over the floor. It's like, all right, maybe let's be a little more cautious this time. So,
you remember that time in Voyager when they go onto the Borg cube and they see that massive pile of disembodied heads and limbs and stuff like that?
on a spike.
Yeah, and then they stay, and it's like, really? It's like the moment you see the trails of blood leading off in all different directions, like, yeah, no, get me up.
That would have been a soul has left my body moment. But yeah, that for what I thought was going to be a lot of the episode, I thought they were going to have the starship in space or the landing party. They didn't. They just abandoned that and they went, "Oh shit, something's happened. Let's get out of here." But let's move.
They couldn't really have even fit in more away stuff.
No,
because like you said, it was a disaster-esque. Several stories being intertwined. If you'd have put a 4th one on there with someone on the planet,
true.
I don't think you would have had time for anything else.
If you'd made this a 2-parter, you could have very well stretched it out. So you could have had maybe Chaplin and Benga on the planet, whatever, doing whatever, and you could have stretched it out in that respect. But
I think instead of stretching out, they
staying
could
away
have.
From that.
They could have. I think they could have gone away with the Benga Una stuff, Chapel stuff like that. Aside from the being, showing that people were dying, this was a serious situation. I felt that plot line of Una taking a serious wound. I mean, it's very classical Trek. Someone takes a serious wound and they're fine by the next episode. But it didn't seem to serve anything to the overall plot. It didn't serve anything for Laan to be to see.
Well, that's the thing. It's more of a setup for a few other small things. First off, it establishes a reason why Lon is given command presence on the bridge, whereas instead of just being computer, she is the actual XO, because proper XO is like incommunicado, cannot be on bridge. So it's that, but it also sets up a nice little follow up from the previous episode, because Mbenga specifically says, you know, there's a regulation against mixing Illyrian and human blood, and then you get that nice little capstone moment of Una, who is secretly an Illyrian, mixing blood with Mbenga for the plasma, and it's like, that's a nice little follow-on from the episode without being too oblique. So I feel like it did serve something. That being said, it was, if we're going with the ABC plot in terms of rank of importance, this is like the D plot.
Yeah.
Well, so there's two things. First of all, I think like we talked about in the pilot, it gives them something to do.
Yeah.
I don't like them beaming stuff on the Spock's eyeball, but it did give, you know, Kyle and Chapel and Mbenga something to do where otherwise wouldn't. If this was a TOS episode, it would have been, you know, 90% Kirk and then 10% Scotty in engineering. So they are giving people a little bit. And they can't help themselves. Not every show can be episodic bottle. This was a very tight bottle episode, except like you said, that callback to their to the last episode. So outside of that, it was pretty tightly contained. So I'm fine with that third little bit. It gives something to them, a little bit of story. We were watching an original series episode today, Gamesters of Triskelion, where finally Uhura gets to go on an away team. She finally gets to leave the bridge. And then she gets locked up with one of the bad guys and essentially gets raped. And it's like, is that the only thing you're going to give to these side characters? So, you know, if they're going to give them a little bit of a medical storyline, a compassion storyline, I'm fine with that. It's better than what they've done in other series.
Was she not on the away team on Mirror Mirror? That's how she ended up over there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, sure, but it doesn't happen very frequently. So.
Very true. Very true.
Can't have women on the away team. It's distracting.
Bad enough they're on the bridge. What was I going to say? I've completely forgotten now.
Apart from you, number one.
Yes. No,
Well, let's talk about this Hammer Uhura side story here.
Yeah. So I'm actually gonna do the auto roll for a moment here, and I'm gonna bring up the quick dribbles. I wasn't a massive fan of some of Uhura's lines here. Most of it I was completely fine with. But there were a few moments like Uhura for the win and a few other little like lines. It was specific lines. It wasn't the tenor of the scene. It wasn't like, because I feel like the emotional development is good. But there were specific moments where I'm like, you guys have done a really good job of setting up that Uhura and Tilly were both in very similar places in their lives as, you know, fourth year cadets, very fresh, very green, and differentiating them in terms of like their personalities. If you had taken this scene out of this Strange New Worlds thing, changed the actors around so that it was Tilly and, say, Stamets, and then plucked it into Discovery, I would have struggled to tell the difference. And I feel like that's a bit of a problem, because Uhura is a very distinct character from Tilly, and this was a bit more Tilly in that respect. And I like both of these characters, but you've got to stay true to their voices. That was kind of my main quibble with this kind of subplot. I like the overall idea of it, but just some of the dialogue could have done with a bit of tweaking.
I know what you mean. I think I understand what you're saying about, you know, the sort of comparison with Tilly sort of doing that kind of outspoken cadet thing, whereas in the previous episode, Uhura had sort of been direct before in I think it was episode 2 was her episode, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You know, she's very direct with Spock, she's very direct with Pike, she spoke her mind, but she wasn't so glib about it. She was sort of more very educated about it. Like when she speaks to Hemmer in the opening scene today, Hemmer is like trying to quiz her and he said, oh, you know nothing about environmental systems. She just stops and kind of just reels off this big list of what she's been studying. That's good Uhura. But yeah, I think you're right with when she was sort of like trying to Grace Under Fire explain herself there, it maybe didn't come across as well.
Yeah, and it was only specific lines. Like, it was like when Hemmer said, oh good, now we can get started, and she turned back, it's like, we're just getting started? Like, that's fine, but it was specifically stuff like for the win that just felt more like Tilly to me.
Well, I agree and I disagree. Personally, I didn't like it. I'm on board with that, and I like sticking to the characters we know. But like you said with Spock, too, he's had so far these emotional outbursts that don't fit with the Spock we know. There was the away mission stuff, 2 episodes ago?
Yeah.
Where he's already so much more advanced with giving these pep talks than he is on TOS. So it's like, it's a little bit incongruous. But like you say, they're trying to show the growth of these characters. And Uhura, especially being very young, fresh out of the academy, it's like there's going to be a little bit more playfulness, a little bit more emotional outbursts. And, you know, I like I love Uhura's character in TOS in the sense of how comfortable she is in her own skin and a very calming presence. And I'm sure we'll see more of that down the line. So if they break that up a little bit and you see a very young version of her, that's okay too. But yeah, I like everyone being professionals on my starship, so I'm okay with it.
Yeah, that's yeah.
Fair enough. How about Hema? Hema's got a bit more sort of interaction with the other crew, especially, well, mostly Uhura this episode. Like, he opened up to her quite early on whilst giving her a bit of a hard time at the start, but there's a little bit of confusion in my head between what an Anar can sense and what he can't sense. So he can sense that a control panel is doing its thing or what it's not doing, but he can't sense that the door is blocked. So like, there's a little bit of incongruity there. But I kind of felt it was awesome. This was a good Hema episode, but I wonder how you guys felt about him and Uhura.
Well, I tell you, if my phone beeps, I know exactly what app the notification is for, right? So I'm sure Hemmer in his home in engineering, if he hears a panel beep, he knows what that means.
True.
You know, if he hears the echo of something, he knows what that means. So I'm okay if you leave it a little bit nebulous. I don't think you need to explain every little thing.
I think it's from a perspective of, you know, I don't have any disabilities, but from the perspective of someone that probably does watch this and does have disabilities, to be able to sort of recognise someone exceeding in that capacity and be able to be, like you say, comfortable in his skin, doing his job, but overcoming what he doesn't. I mean, he has a line which is like something like Uhura's just like, oh, you know, for those that can see, and he's like, well, I wouldn't know. You know, he's comfortable in his skin. He knows exactly what he can do.
Yeah, I know that for someone like you and to a degree me as well, we're kind of more lore guys who kind of enjoy kind of the scientific breakdowns of how this kind of works. So not knowing the boundaries of Hemmer's sight and his senses is a little bit like, but that being said, it's like it's nebulous enough that I don't really mind it.
It's gas giant enough. They were not in a nebula.
Yes,
Black holy enough.
That being said, I just kind of realized that you were talking about Uhura being comfortable in her own skin and seeing Hema like that with that kind of self-assuredness even when he's injured. Do you think maybe that's kind of like, because obviously he is inspiring her, do you think maybe that's kind of what drives her to be so comfortable in her own skin? That example of someone who is dealing with a sensory impairment but who is so utterly himself that no one can really he gets his hand crushed and he gets quite badly injured and yet it doesn't slow him down for a moment really.
He can snap his fingers in engineering and everyone walks out like that's inspiring.
This is a teacher-student dynamic, kind of like we talked about the scene with La'an and Pike at the end a few episodes ago, where he's not going to let her see the vulnerability in the core, but he is going to try to lead her along in the same way. I mean, he specifically is doing the mentor, bring your child to work day and engineering thing. So it makes sense that he's not going to show her exactly how fallible he is or how much he's hurting. And so, yeah, that was fine for me.
Yeah, I also like how it tied into the whole Anar spirituality, because that's kind of the big difference between them and standard Andorians, that they have they're very devoted to their pacifism and a sense of balance and stuff in the universe. So seeing him channel that toward a specific purpose in engineering, like that's a really cool way of developing that character. And I also like that we're kind of seeing almost say the roots of like Uhura's engineering expertise, because she does do quite a bit of engineering, like fixing her compound and stuff like that in TOS, and true, to see that kind of like
she foreshadowed the blue scrubs on, doesn't she, at one point?
Yeah, exactly. It's like she gets to do a bit of nitty gritty work, and maybe Hemmer's kind of a bit of a pushing her to not only speak the language but know how to repair your own equipment is useful.
Before we get on to the awesomeness that was the Starship battle, one thing I want to talk about is La'an's directness. Like, we noticed this a few episodes before, but she was very, like, she's not afraid of just getting on the comms and just shouting at Pike, said, "Shields up now," or standing on the bridge and not confronting him, but almost telling him in a. I found that as a kind of very. Like I said this to you guys, if Pike was Jellicoe, there would have been a moment where he'd be like, "Get off the bridge, you don't supersede these orders." But Pike has the wisdom enough to listen to her, even if she's like in a state of panic, because he knows. But she is very direct. She is very almost antagonistic, but to get the job done.
Well, I think part of what plays into that relationship is that Pike understands that she is not speaking from a position of arrogance. She is not speaking in a position of believing she's in command. She is coming from a place of knowledge, of, to a degree, pessimism, which is more understandable than arrogance. And kind of what you want in a security officer, really, is kind of what their job is. And it does kind of just strike me when you look at Lon, I look at her and I think of Worf, and I think of Reed, and I think of all the times they made perfectly reasonable and, in hindsight, really smart tactical decisions that were ignored by a captain because they said it in a slightly too loud of a tone, or because it's belligerent. And if you think about what could have happened if they had been even a few seconds before it behind, things could have been even worse for them when they got hit by that Gorn ship. So I don't mind her being authoritative when the safety of the ship and 400 lives is on the line.
It's like in the show 24. If they would listen to Jack Bauer, then they call the show 3 instead of 24. You know, I definitely sense a big Worf parallel there. She's outspoken and a little bit aggressive. The difference is, I feel, and I don't mean this, diminutively, but especially in this episode and in other parts, Pike feels a little bit like a kindergarten teacher, where he already knows the answers, but he's going to let the kids figure it out for themselves, and that's how they grow is by experiencing it. So when she yells at him, shields up or whatever, or they're explaining this, or they're talking about how they're going to trick the Gorn ship later using the black hole, it's like he's kind of one step ahead, but he's going to let them give the suggestion, and then he's going to go along with it. So at first blush, it felt to me like, he's not leading very strongly, but it's sort of just a different style where he knows the answer, but he's going to make them feel like they've got the answer.
I think that there's a story I read to my children. It's about the stray kitten, and one of the things is like, the kitten watches everything around them, and they learn to listen, to be patient, to watch the world around them, and like that's just what Pike does. He's wise enough to listen to the officers, not how they're saying it, but why they're saying it and where that's coming from. Like he has that kind of, and again, it's another one of the +1 for Pike love all round. Like, and it just makes you fall in love with him all the more. He has that ability just to take things at a distance and kind of go, okay, why are you saying this? Why are you doing this? Like, okay, I will listen.
But at the same time, he doesn't let that overshadow decorum when it comes to it. Because when she has that outburst in the briefing room, he is, smart enough not to dress her down in front of the other officers because that's bad for morale, it's bad for her professional career. But he still says, hey, you might want to put a button on this because A, I'm your captain, but B, also this isn't a good look for the rest of the crew to see the security officer freaking out.
Especially
he's
the
also,
third officer, or second officer, sorry.
Yeah, I believe he's also the oldest commanding officer we see in the main series.
Possibly.
So it makes sense that he would have, Patrick Stewart, despite being bald, was meant to be, in his 40s in TNG?
About that,
so... Yeah, and Pike's around 50, so it makes sense that his command style would be a little bit more
assured.
God, it's mind-bending to me to think that Pike is older than Picard in this series. Like Picard season 1, I always think of him about like experienced officer in his 60s. Like it bends my mind.
Hey, by the time we talk about the next series and record these, we'll be older than Patrick Stewart was in TNG.
I think we probably are. If Will Wheaton is, then we definitely are. But yeah, okay. Let's move on to the bit that everyone loved about this episode, which was the very science heavy.
Not everyone.
Oh, not interesting. But
I have to be contrarian. It's in my contract.
Absolutely. But the battle, the ship battle that reminisces everything from Wrath of Khan, Starship Down, Insurrection. Like there is one-on-one starship combat where everyone's at a little bit of a disadvantage. And it's compelling. The one thing, and I've said this before we get onto that, but how do you feel about the Pike plot armor? His self-referential plot armor. He knows he is not going to die here. He knows that he is going to be fine here. But do you think that influences his decision when he says she'll be fine, the Enterprise will be fine, when he dives into that gas nebula?
Well, but we talked about, so we watched the episode right before we record these, and I think it was Stars who said, yeah, but he's still got to worry about the rest of his crew. Now, we've seen him already in the first 2 episodes absolutely agonizing over these decisions about his future and what's going to happen, and can I save them anyway? Can I let someone else save them and save myself? And he knows he can't do that. He would never forgive himself if Ortega's took, a alien pigman's bayonet to the gut because he was,
cocky
or negligent. Yeah. So it's, as the mother hen of the show, of the ship, he's got to make sure everyone else is safe too. So we started out with all the reflection stuff and him looking to his future, but I think as we go on, we're going to see him completely forget about self and start worrying about everyone else, making sure they get out of things alive too.
Yeah, the thing with Pike is that he's in a really interesting dilemma in which he knows exactly how he thinks he's going. The canon says that he should die. Let's go with that. But he also is.
My history isn't written yet.
But he's also the kind of captain who takes every single loss very seriously, and he feels it because, as Spock says in one of the, it's played very quickly, but it's still played with enough gravitas by Peck and Mount that you kind of go, yeah, okay, this is a moment that matters.
Which, by the way, toward the end of the episode where he's on the bridge, and you get that close up on him with the emotions, like, oh, that was really good.
Yeah, they do supreme work in this,
and that's what I mean by the plot armor thing. Like, especially with Uhura as well. You know the stakes aren't there. We know she survives. Everyone knows she survives. But that moment isn't for us. That moment is for Pike. It's for Pike to be able to react to it and further embolden his character. And like it's a character moment to reestablish what the stakes are for the people in the script rather than the people watching it. Or at least the knowledgeable, at least the Star Trek fans are watching it. The casual viewer who knows nothing has just started watching Star Trek, has just watched Strange New Worlds, would obviously probably be as tense as everyone else. But
yeah, well, it's this sort of thing where like Pike is in a unique situation where he knows he can't die, but he knows that he doesn't know about everyone else. So he has to stride that. And to be fair, it's kind of a thing all captains have to deal with, which is that like you have to deal with the knowledge that anyone under your command could die at any moment if you make the wrong decision. So don't let yourself become cocky through belief in your own tactics, your own expertise, your own experience, your own force personality, or your knowledge that you won't die for another 9 years. Like, you have to have that command ability to know, okay, I'm taking an unnecessary risk here because of things I know. So it's a cool way to make him, to give him stakes, as it were, so that he isn't just nihilistically just going through life. It keeps him humanistic and invested in his crew.
You know, you're not going to like this, but this feels, it's starting to feel more like the anti-Discovery, where Burnham is kind of like the center of the universe, and you have the moons floating around her. In this case, Pike is still the center of the show, but it feels like more of the importance is being placed on everything orbiting around him, and he's just trying to keep it together. So,
yeah, no, I think that's definitely, to a degree, that's probably true. And it's a very different style
Hold on,
choice.
you're supposed to disagree with me, and then we're supposed to argue, and then Idle breaks it up. Come on.
Okay, all right. How about this? So, Otto, what was your fault with the submarine battle here?
I felt it went on too long. Like I said, the stuff at the beginning, then maybe a little bit at the end, they could have given more to and shortened this. It felt like it went on for 30 of the 45 minutes. I didn't time anything out, but I think if you're doing longer ship stuff, it works better as the submarine, the Hunt for Red October, the silent running, build the suspense and kind of have the underline and let the music show. And this felt like a lot of fast flying, a lot of bright colors, it was a little bit too frantic to keep the pace up for that long. I think if they'd either brought down the pace or shortened it, either way would have worked for me a little bit better.
So you would have kind of preferred more moments like that bit where, like, Spock says ETA of the other ship, like 1 minute, and then they just have to wait for a minute as it passes over with the radar, like kind of more like that rather than the rest of it.
I mean, they're doing stunning visuals on this show. They could spread that out a little bit more reaction shots of sweaty Spock and etc.
He was very sweaty, wasn't he?
Vulcans don't sweat except for Spock. No, we've retconned that already. He has human sweat glands, so it was okay. So.
Vulcan be damned.
So I know, for me, I thought the ship battle was like nicely balanced. I especially appreciated that. So one of the big things people love about Wrath of Khan is that it's an equal trade of damage, right? That like the Enterprise gets completely wrecked out of the gate, and then it has to basically fight and claw back every win that it gets from that point forward. And this kind of does that to a degree.
Sorry, if I had a penny for every time the Enterprise got wrecked in a nebula, I'd have 2 pence. It's not a lot, but it's weird that it's happened twice.
Dude, they beat the hell out of the ship in this episode, and I wouldn't mind if they open next episode in space dock and someone's welding on the outside of the ship.
I think Stars, you said like it gets wrecked more than the NX-01 in the Xindi arc. Like it's
yeah, it's true actually. Yeah. But yeah, what was I going to say? So, yeah, in Wrath of Khan, to a degree, Khan's opening salvo is because Kirk makes a mistake, right? If he had been following actual regulations, as quoted by Mr. Savick, that wouldn't have happened. But here, interestingly, the Gorn play their hand extremely well.
Yeah.
They use that colonist ship as perfect bait. They wait for the transport tube, which is confusingly named. It should really just be called a docking tube.
The space straw. the silly straw of space. Yeah.
And it's like, like when Pike realizes that ship is incoming and that there's nothing he could do, he can't raise the shields, and he just goes, oh no, it's because he knows he's been played. And it's not like because Kirk wasn't played, he played himself. He actually just made a mistake. Here, Pike committed no mistakes and still lost that opening exchange.
Oh, paraphrasing the Picard quote there, are we? But you can see that in Pike's face when he sits there and he kind of goes, the dramatic zoom on his face and goes, "Oh no!" And he knows he's fucked up. Like,
yeah, but that's the thing. It's a case of he fucked up, but in the ways that a Starfleet captain has to fuck up. It's like, yes, if you were more callous with human life, by all means, you probably could have avoided that. But that's not the way a Starfleet captain should act, and that's what I think elevates the Gorn in this instance, because a lot of stuff has to be done for the Gorn because we can never see them. But by canon and by stylistic choice, we cannot see a mustachioed Gorn on the bridge going.
Well, I mean, we can, the audience can, but they can. We were talking about that when we were watching. We don't know what their plans are for the Gorn. Are they set up to be the Romulans and Klingons and Cardassians of the series, or are we just going to get an episode here and there, or is this it? Anything's on the table. But if they are going to do more protracted stuff, it's got to be, like you said, the Romulan arc and Enterprise, where we see them, but the players don't see them. And they could do that too and make it work.
That could work as well. But it's just a case of, for the stylistic choice of the submarine feel of this, they decided to go with, you never see the Gorn. You see a shadow and you hear a sound. That's it. And because of that, you need to establish your villain purely through their tactics and what they do. And through this, you learn a lot about the Gorn and their tactics. You learn about them sacrificing their own ships. You learn about how callous they are with human life and how nefarious and how dishonorable they'll be. Like, you would never really see, even Klingons or Romulans would never really go this far to trap a ship when setting up a colonist ship and waiting for the...
It's almost Hirogen. It's almost a little bit of Hirogen in that.
A little bit. There's a little bit of that hunter instinct, but I think even Hirogen would think that's a little bit far. But the Gorn seem to enjoy it.
How many chess matches are won without sacrificing a pawn or two?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. If they're big picture baddies, I mean they entered the fight 4-1 basically on ships, so they had the ammunition to burn there. And yeah, it is interesting to see. I mean, they weren't exactly suicide bombing, but the next closest thing.
It was considered an acceptable tactical move. And that's something I found kind
of...
It's
very Zach Dornian.
Yeah, it is indeed. I would like to see a Gorn play Stratagema. So, what I find interesting...
He's only got 3 fingers.
Sorry, yeah. He has to work extra hard. So, what I find interesting is that the Enterprise doesn't win this fight. They get away, but they don't win.
They survive.
They survive, exactly. And I find that interesting, not just because of how it ties into Lon's arc, and it ties it way more thematically and in terms of the style of the show to Enterprise and TOS, where more often than not, it's not a case of, we won through the overpowering force of the Galaxy-class Enterprise D or the overwhelming firepower of the Defiant. We got away. We got lucky to a degree. And it's like the Federation is still only 100 years old at this point, so it's still kind of, it isn't the big dickiness power, and I think it can't afford to just throw ships away. Like, a Constitution class is a big investment for them, so it feels like having them get away with still that capital ship around.
It reminds me of the early Enterprise episode where they meet the Shroomies. Where they're attacked by the ship that doesn't identify themselves, that hunts them. It's sort of, and I've said this before, like, these first 4 episodes of Strange New Worlds are evoking all the different tropes of Trek. This is like, there is not... I don't mean to sound diminutive about it, but there is not an original idea in these first 4 episodes, but they are done very well. Like, they are done really well. They're establishing things that people know that make good stories in Star Trek. Like, it's done in a way that, like, you can say, it references this episode or this episode without saying, like, do you remember the Balance of Terror? No, it does it in its own way.
Yeah. There are enough coats of paint on here right now that it's kind of hard to notice.
Yeah.
You have a new ship, new crew, new stories being floated around, and while the viewers are still trying to wrap their head around who these new players are, you can slip in some of the, let's do another mirror, as long as it's like episodic, self-contained, and that's not going to ruin.
It's the balance between the existing Trekkies that want this, that have wanted this for a long time since Enterprise finished, and also new viewers who are coming to this first time and actually going, oh shit, this is some good television. This is better than all the kind of the negative stuff, or the serialized stuff we've been watching since 2001. You know, this is kind of like almost feels like a refreshing peak to the end of Battlestar Galactica to kind of go, oh, we're going back to this now.
Well, it's sort of like the strength of the show is that for people like us who know all the references, who've seen all these episodes, it's refreshing to see them done in a new way with a new like slick coat of paint, like you say. But for people who I imagine are getting into this brand new, I can't even imagine how much fun it must be to watch something like this, for it to be relatively fresh, and then to get to go back and watch all those episodes when you've gotten into Star Trek and be like,
people are.
oh,
We've
so
seen
in all the DNA, you know?
In our own Discord, in the Timeline Store Discord, we've seen people coming and going, I've only watched Discovery. I'm now starting to watch Stranger Worlds. I've watched like some TNG and some TOS. And like, no, yeah. go back, watch, and they do, and they're enjoying it. Like it's a phenomenon that's happening, and I think that's a brilliant thing for all these new Star Trek. Even well, we love me and Stars, we love Discovery. I'll tell you on the other side. But for the people. It exists, but I think the joy in that is people are watching Discovery for the first time and kind of going, oh, what's this whole Star Trek thing about? Going back to the original stuff and enjoying it. DS9 is seeing such a revival now, more than it has when it was launched, because people are kind of appreciating it for the first time. It's like, oh shit, this is actually genius.
So here's a thought based on, if we can back up a minute or two, talking about they didn't win, they survived. There were some casualties, and you likened it to TOS, and you know, we all remember 1,000 TOS episodes where they beam down to the planet, red shirt guy dies to establish the danger of the episode, and then they go from there. And it feels like they're using these sacrifices to craft a longer story arc rather than the bad guy of the week. Maybe I'm talking out of my head, but I mean, tell me if you guys feel that the same sort of parallel where they're making the sacrifices and they want to make it mean something, but for a more long-term purpose rather than the bad guys of the episode.
It's what comes of setting a bottle episode or an episodic thing. Is like you have to set all your stakes in those opening 10 minutes, as opposed to a serialized show, which we've had over the last 10, 20 years, where they can establish that over the first season, and then the second season they can start to pay off. Like we are now sort of evolved to see two different storytelling styles that have, like I say, like they've evolved through our sensibilities as experienced TV watchers or people that are looking. You know, we're looking at it from a different time now. Like back in the 90s or back in the 80s, 90s, people were syndicating things. They wanted people to just tune in now. But we're in the streaming age now, and it's like music when Spotify turned up or when the streaming services turned up. It's like you don't have to just listen to what's in the top 40. You can just listen to whatever you like. Do you like serialized stuff? Go watch that. Do you like episodic stuff? Go watch this. There's the options now. Like people, directors, producers are adapting. I mean, obviously they're going to follow the money, but they're adapting to know that they can market to different areas because those areas are much wider now.
Yeah. Speaking of like sacrifices, do you realize that these are the first casualties we get in the show? No one died in episodes 1, 2, and 3.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah, no one died.
Yeah. Well, that's not terribly unusual, but you know,
Carl's boyfriend died in this one. Like the sorry, I mean, I'm trying to say red shirt, but I don't want to. I want to say he's a blue shirt. Like, yeah. He died.
I think a body count of 7 is substantial enough to make up for it. And they do the...
That's what I like about it. I like that it took us 4 episodes to get here, and that when it happens, it feels like a loss.
And you do the good old Starfleet flag draped over the torpedoes, you know, which makes it feel a lot more like a funeral than a, you know, I'll make a note in the log and send a letter to their family or whatever.
Here is Data doing a speech to Ira Graves' funeral, as
to know them was to love them.
So you were talking earlier about everyone gets a moment to do. I'm kind of surprised by the amount of precedence that Kyle is getting. So in fact, that he didn't get a poster. I don't think anyone really realized he's meant to be TOS Kyle. He even got like his own little emotional moment with, you know, recognizing that blue shirt at the beginning of the episode, and then having, which by the way, really cool use of a undiscovered country under the camera perspective shot.
Oh yes,
right
yeah,
I love that little. That's one of those things that if this is your first Star Trek, you go back and watch Undiscovered Country. It's like, that's the reference. That's very cute. But for a character who doesn't even have like a guest star credit or whatever like that, it's nice to see him getting like a lot of prominence. And
he's
like
the
that.
O'Brien of the series. He's the Carey.
Yeah,
he's
I've been transport chief.
Yeah.
Well, so I had and maybe still have a problem with them recasting uh, racially April and now Kyle.
Hmm.
But the more I think about it, those characters are minor enough that if you want, if you intend to actually follow through and give them a character and give them stories, then that's fine. If you don't want to create a whole new, I'd still rather they create their own personally unique character and then give them the same kind of growth that you want to do with Kyle and April or whatever. But I think it's nice to see it regardless.
I think this is kind of what I'm seeing with Chapel as well, and like I love the characterization of Strange New Worlds Chapel. She has a small moment in this as well, in this episode as well. I can see a lot of the complaints for people. I think Bigger said this on the last episode. Like, he doesn't see her as this Chapel, the Chapel that we know from TOS, from a little bit in the movies as well. I wouldn't have been sad if they said this is an original character. But they did name her Chapel. But I love this character that is her. That what Jess Bush is doing. I love everything about that. But I can see why people complain to say, is this Chapel?
I think Chapel is where I would draw the line, though, because she does get enough stuff in the show and in the movies that her character is much more fleshed out than Kyle or April or whatever. So I would rather them stick more closely to what Chapel was than Kyle and April, and you can maybe go nuts with those characters who had so little to work with.
I can definitely understand the criticism. That being said, it's like it is a case of with 60s writing of women, it's not necessarily going to be the strongest. I'm not sad to see a lot of the stuff that we knew of 60s Chapel necessarily be thrown out. That being said, some of the stuff that I do like about 60s Chapel did get a bit of a nod this week, with the reference to, do you still have an interest in archaeological medicine, tying into
Corby.
Dr. Roger Corby.
Yeah.
Now, if that is a hint at a wider story arc, and Roger Corby appears, or is referenced, or is actually a part of a Chapel, because we haven't had a
We
Chapel
see Andrea.
storyline.
We are going to get Dr. Roger Corby played by Ethan Peck in a mustache. And he's all jacked up and tall, and he's going to walk on the bridge and, hello, I'm Dr. Roger Corby, and it's going to be wonderful.
This explains why she has such hots for Spock, doesn't it?
Yeah, there you go.
But if we see a capitalization on her storyline from TOS, and it sets that up and it justifies its thing, then I'm not too upset about a bit of character drift. That being said, if Chapel does basically wholly original stuff and it's just Chapel in name only and a few references, then that's a bit of an annoyance.
Well,
it depends on how they capitalize on it.
It's
really.
similar to the Uhura thread we discussed earlier, where a few of those lines are out of character for her, and it's the same with Chapel. Some of those are out of character. Nevertheless, Chapel from TOS is still forthright and clever and a strong woman on her own right. So I think they're keeping that, and we'll see. It's still too early on a lot of this stuff. But,
It is.
we got 2 hours to fill while we're streaming, so let's go ahead and cover everything.
Let's okay. Just a final thing before we wrap up. Gorn ships and Gorn in general. This is the second time they've been mentioned. The second time we're seeing this thread. Do you think this is going to be a thread they pull on a little bit more in the remaining 6 episodes? Do we see this is the serialized element that's sort of coming out with La'an's character, and a little bit of Una as well, having rescued La'an from the Gorn?
What I would do, and maybe they are doing it, with La'an, they've given her some command stuff. They've given her, quote-unquote, 2 out of the 4 episodes so far, a couple Gorn references. What I would do, if I'm structuring this, thinking long-term, give them a few episodes, wait till the end of the season, see what viewer feedback is, and if they like it, then you can always sprinkle more in as you go forward. But it depends if they already have these bad guys that they want to cover, or if they are already sure that they want to make La'an a really main character.
Do you think they're going to do the classic classic Trek thing and end on a hangover, on a cliffhanger? I'm thinking my own beer brain here. End on a cliffhanger with the dun dun dun, best of worlds, dun 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 dun.
It doesn't break the episodic precedent too badly.
No, it doesn't.
I don't think they will. I think this is going to be entirely episodic. I think episode 10 is going to be a one and done, and then maybe as the show goes on and they see how people respond to the more heavily serialized elements of the show, then they might course correct for that. Because if you think about TNG season 1, that also didn't end on a cliffhanger, right? And so did season 2. Well, we don't want to talk about what it actually ended on.
DS9 season 1 didn't either.
Yeah,
Voyager season 1 didn't, or season 2.
Yeah, it's not without
Yeah,
precedent, especially
yeah.
for an early season. Like you want to let it, and I think especially because Strange New Worlds is almost implicitly positioned as a response to people who did not enjoy Discovery or Picard, that they are going to take their time with it and be a bit more careful about adjusting it to what people enjoy and don't enjoy and crafting it a bit toward that. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. Like, people always talk derogatively about fan service, like, oh, you're just doing what the fans want. It's like, to a degree, you kind of have to course correct if the fans are pointing out that they're just straight up not enjoying the shows. Although I think most people can be relatively positive about this.
I think this is where Strange New Worlds does the best thing about the fan service, isn't that they don't address it, but they nod to it. They nod to various things. Like, I mean, the fan service is straight out there. They've got Uhura, Chapel, and Benga, Pike, Spock, all in there. Like, the fan service is right there in the cast.
T'Pring even.
And T'Pring as well. They don't need
and not spoilery, but the name of the next episode also. So
exactly.
There's
like,
quite a bit of it.
They're going head on with it, as opposed to just going, oh, do you remember this? Like, no, they're going, no, we remember it and we're addressing it. Like this, it's where I find that's quite refreshing a little way. But they're not using that fan service to just kind of go, oh, the Alderaan's in System X13 from episode 412 of Next Generation. Like, we don't get a lot of that.
But we have like 18 concurrent Trek series right now, and they can all handle fan service in their own way. I mean.
Do you think it's because Lower Decks is doing what Lower Decks does, and it is pure like nods and fan service, and almost the Family Guy kind of cut away to this sort of Star Trek scene and things like that? Maybe they're using that as the kind of like, get it all out of your system in Lower Decks, and we're going to do this.
Well, minor Picard season 3 spoilers, but I figure that's what Picard would be, because I mean you're calling it Picard for Pete's sake, and now in season 3 they're like, well, let's get the old gang back together. So it's all the series are handling fan service in their own way, and so far Strange New Worlds is doing it all right.
Okay, episode rating out of 10.
Well, hold on.
Oh, wait.
EV suits.
Oh yeah, he wants to talk about
EV suits, because you guys didn't cover it last time. When
you were gagging for the bit for this.
They are, to me, the perfect blend of reinvent. They're not reinventing the wheel, but they sure are spiffing it up, and so you still get you see it at a glance, and if you're very familiar with TOS, you know exactly what they're going for. You can almost see Kirk floating in the ether in one of the new EV suits. So I think they did really well between a nod to the old. You still get the colors. So I mean, we've complimented Discovery for that. Seeing the colors on the EV suit for the command and their divisions and stuff. So I think they look great.
Yeah, it is a nice evolution from the Discovery look, which was especially in season 2, where I quite liked it, but it was a little bit ahead of its time. Whereas here it's a bit more harkening toward the TOS big suppository style ones, which are they're design classics. Let's be real here. Yeah, it's a nice little blend of it, and I am a sucker for color coding your EV suits, because that was a thing that was meant to be with the first Contact suits, but they didn't end up going with it. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah, because when they go out onto the dish in First Contact, they're all red because they're all command officers, and the idea was that you would have them color coded for your department because it makes sense, right? And then they just reused the exact same suits over and over again, so it just became default red.
Fair enough.
Whereas here, because we have a big budget and we can have many EV suits of different colors, we can do what we like. So if we're going in for the rating, gentlemen, how many neon torpedo casings out of 10 would you give this episode?
Yes, if we're going to follow the Tron movie style of I'm going to decorate myself everything in LEDs, because this is the age we all have our computers with LED lights.
Well,
when I watched the episode, I was a solid 9. I'm talked down to an 7. I think this is a solid episode. I think is let down by the bits around the edges. I think there are little things here and there, like the pacing of the plot with the B and the C plot, with just general stuff there. I know loads of people rave about this episode. I love the submarine warfare stuff. I love the amount of science there is when they're devising about coming out of the gas giant and going into the black hole. Oh, maybe it's an 8. No, I'm going to say it's an 8. I'm going to settle on an 8. I talk myself down. I talk myself up.
You talk yourself down to a 7, gone for an 8. 8, I think, is a safe one for what you've been saying about. You seem to genuinely quite enjoy this episode. So, Otto, how many neon torpedo casings out of 10 for you?
This one is a 6 for me, and I've been pretty generous with the other ones, but it was a little bit too much. The pacing was more like Star Trek 2009 skydiving than it was a submarine battle for me. And like I said, if they would have devoted more of that to maybe either the side plots or calmed it down a little bit, that would have worked better. But I liked almost all the character stuff. I liked the little Una Mbenga angle, which was the only thing carried over. I liked that it was neatly bottled, and even Hemmer I'm warming up to a little bit. So I liked all the individual parts, but I don't think it was constructed very well.
I'm going to go with an 8 out of 10 for this one. I think it is still a strong episode, and I think this is a good streak that they're still on. I think it is a little bit let down by a few like structural issues here, and structural integrity is holding just about. But I think it's just a case of it's not quite as elegantly constructed as, say, the first 2 episodes were, where they felt like perfect encapsulations of Trek. This felt like it was pulling on maybe a few too many strings at once, and it could have done with either a few redraftings or cutting off 1 or 2 like strands for a bit more of a compact experience.
For our own structural issues, can we just break format and spend 2 minutes on the shuttle stuff?
Oh yeah,
because it felt like it didn't seem very integral to the plot to me, but it felt like, all right, we have this great new set, let's throw it into the next episode. So they went out on their trip together and then came back a couple minutes later.
Budgeting is on the phone somewhere saying, like, you've got the shuttlecraft set, it's gathering dust, like, you better use it, otherwise we're striking it.
Well, I like the fact that it does make it more of a team effort that they took down the 3 ships, because otherwise it would have been Pike with the torpedo depth charge and then Pike again with the Pike maneuver. So here you get Lon and Spock like working out through a linguistic thing. In fact, it would have been kind of nice to get Uhura in on that, but then I suppose she was indisposed with her other plot, so you can't have her in every place at once. I didn't mind it because it meant that everyone got to contribute to the ship, like combat aspect of it. Otherwise, it would have been all Pike, and that would have been fine. But I liked that it was a team effort, and I also appreciate that you get a little bit of emotional development for Spock here, where he gets to show emotion.
The unexpected,
I like that.
I said to you guys, like, first episode they mention, Michael Burnham as a kind of through thread. Bring it back up again now, which I didn't expect. I thought they were just going to kind of go, there's our time to disco in the first episode, and now we're going to move on, and Spock will be Spock. But he did open up to La'an and sort of, open up. He shut her down, basically, as soon as he mentioned, you've lost someone, and we hear the voice of Michael Burnham, but yeah.
I really appreciated Ethan Peck's delivery on that. I think we should end.
Yeah, and when they come out of the mind meld, and he's
like, that is a hard line in the sand.
Yeah.
Peck and Mount, the emotional stuff, they knocked it out of the park. That being said, I did not like the mind meld stuff because, again, for continuity reasons, they treat it in early Trek like this sort of mythical thing where they don't peel back too many layers of the onion. And in this one, it's like she convinces Spock in 2 lines, "Hey, want to mind meld with me? All right, it's our only chance." And then they do it. They're in the mind dreamland, and they're speaking completely lucidly, like they were just in real life, but in a different location. And I like it better that it's a little more nebulous and not everything is completely lucid, and it's more of a dream state. And I think that would have been more congruent with a lot of the more mind meld stuff we see from early Trek. So, but that being said, the when he comes out of it and then later with Pike, it's just the emotional stuff. The acting is very good.
There's not a weak link in this cast.
No one's whispering, and no one's getting too emotional. No one's too emotionless. Spock, we're still a little whitewater rafting on his journey, and next week we'll probably get more, but the acting I absolutely love.
Man, just Anson Mount. It's Anson Mount all the way down.
Yeah,
all right.
Yeah, no, there is a reason why he is the show exists, basically, and it shows.
Pretty much. That man must feel very proud of himself right now. We will be back with our next review episode very soon. So from ourselves, we'll see you later. Bye-bye. Ta-ra.